Ladies and gentlemen and future homeowners, I'm delighted to welcome you to this real estate education event where we embark on a journey to explore the exciting world of property ownership, investment, and the path to achieve your real estate dreams. Today, we gather here to empower you with knowledge and insight, to demystify the real estate market and to help you make informed decisions on your path to home ownership. At Crompton Partners, we believe buying a home is not just a transaction, it's a very important moment on your life. And it's about establishing foundation and creating a sanctuary and achieving a cherished dream. In the upcoming session, you will learn about market trends, negotiation strategies, financing options, and much more. Now, let me introduce you to the main speaker of today, Ben Crompton. Ben is a law graduate from Cambridge University who has worked in London and Abu Dhabi. He brings expertise in property investment and the legal aspect of the real estate. Ben is frequently published and quoted in the media in relation to the UAE property and the real estate market.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for that lovely introduction, and thank you to all of you for turning up today to our presentation, which is entitled, as you can see here, Discover Real Estate in Abu Dhabi. Is buying right for you? And is buying right for you is a very, very British thing to say. No pressure. We're just here to explain whether buying is right for you, whether it's buying a home or an investment. Now, first of all, we'd like to thank our partners in this event, which is the British Chamber of Commerce. Their banner is up here. They've helped us organize this. And our preferred mortgage provider, Holo, who will be taking an advanced, serious part in this debate, discussing financing options with us and hopefully educating you more on your mortgage, on how to get a mortgage basically in Abu Dhabi. Now, what are we expecting out of this? What value are we going to show you this evening? So, first of all, most people will be looking at buying a property either to live in it or as an investment. So we're going to cover both those things this evening. Is it better to rent or buy? Obviously, most people in Abu Dhabi rent. Now we're getting more and more options to buy, so it's well worth people thinking about, okay, I'm renting now, should I buy? Is investing in a property a good idea? And we're going to show you the numbers behind that so you can make that decision for yourselves. What should I buy? If you do want to buy a property investment, we've got some hints and tips based on the local market here. How do you actually buy something? One of the big impediments that we find most people have to buying, they don't know the process. Okay, they don't know how it works. They don't know where to begin. They are worried about the legal implications. And then we're going to finish off with a Q&A on mortgages, and then talk about why are people buying off plan and should I. There's a good reason why we'll talk about that, which I'll mention now. How's the market? A lot of people ask, how's the market? What's going on in Abu Dhabi real estate at the moment? So a number which is completely meaningless, 7,844 transactions were registered in the year to date. This is from CBRE's latest report in Q3. Off-plan transactions grew by 135.5%. Secondary market transactions rose by 22.7%. So we've included a bit at the end here on off-plan transactions because, as you can see, off-plan is flying. Okay, it's absolutely going crazy at the moment, not just in Dubai, but in Abu Dhabi. Whereas you can see secondary market, a little bit slower there. Average apartment prices in Abu Dhabi increased by about 1%, whereas villas marginally dropped by 1%. So quite a discrepancy there between off-plan and secondary market. So a bit of history. So this is the Abu Dhabi market here since January 2009. Okay, had its highs. The whole world real estate market crashed until 2012. We had our recovery here. This was the oil market crash here, and since then We had quite a slow decline into 2020, and since then the market's flattened out. You want to compare that with the UK market? So I'll use my little laser pointer here. So here the UK market had exactly the same crash as us here into 2009, and then it's been slowly recovering reasonably consistently until this point, which is when COVID hit here, and then just starting to tail off a little bit now. Now we're going to talk about buying your own home. Like I said, most people will buy property for one of two reasons. You're going to buy your own home to live in, or you're going to buy it as an investment. So there are many reasons to buy your own home, of course. Customization, it's going to be where you're going to live, you can make renovations, you can have it how you like. Capital appreciation, it's a product that can appreciate in value, though we wouldn't normally buy it for that if we were just going to buy our home. Rent control, something people don't think about, but it's quite useful out here. If you own your own home, your landlord can't raise your rent, you are your landlord. And then is it, and this is the question that we're going to answer today, hopefully, cheaper than renting? Of course, everyone's got to live somewhere. We started off renting at least when we got here. Does it make more sense to buy rather than rent? It's a very simple calculation. Does buying make more sense than renting? Okay, and that simple calculation can be done by anyone using a mortgage calculator. Now, there's lots of mortgage calculators online. Holo have a great mortgage calculator there. This mortgage calculator, however, if you want to scan this QR code, you don't have to. I'll show you how it works. You don't have to scan this QR code, but this mortgage calculator is a little bit different, and that it shows something called an amortization schedule, which is a very long word, but it basically breaks down the mortgage that you're going to get into two parts. So those of you who want to scan that, please go ahead. And then, so this mortgage calculator will bring up something like this, and I've just picked an absolutely random example out of nowhere. Let's say, for example, the price of the home that you are renting is 2 million to buy. Okay, you've spoken to your landlord. He's like, yeah, I'll sell it for 2 million. Now you need a mortgage, so you're going to look at. I'm going to use my laser pointer here again. Your down payment. We'll talk about loan to value ratios later. Your down payment is going to be at least 20%. And let's say your loan term's 25 years and interest rate's 5%. Now, these are just examples. We can go through your actual numbers with you and show you actually how this thing works. But this is just an example of how you or anyone can quite easily and simply calculate whether it's easier or cheaper to buy rather than rent. So you put those in the mortgage calculator and you click calculate, and you get this. This is, like I said before, an amortization schedule. So this means in the first year that you're paying your mortgage, you're going to be paying 79,000 interest, 32,000 principal, and this is your end balance. Okay, so what I've put a square around there is the interest. So this is the only number that you need to really think about. Is the interest lower than your rent? If the interest is lower than your rent, then it makes financial sense to buy. Now, why is this? So your mortgage payments to your bank make up two different things: interest and principal. Interest is what you pay the bank and you never get that back. That is what they require from you to lend you the money. Remember, you're buying something for 2 million, they're going to lend you 1.6 million. They're charging you 79,000 dirhams to lend that to you for 1 year. But they will also ask you to pay some of that loan back. Some of that 1.6 million that you borrowed, that is this 32,000 here. So you just check your rent. So let's say your rent's 100,000, your interest is 79,000. You can say it is cheaper to buy rather than rent. The principal that you pay to the bank, you don't lose. The interest you lose, you never get that back. The principal you don't lose because it pays off the loan. The principal pays off the loan, and you can see that in this right-hand column here. You borrowed 1,600,000, and by the end of the year, you only owe the bank 1,567,000. So if you sell your property at the same value you bought it, you get this principal back. Now, that's not a particularly easy concept to get your head around, and certainly I don't explain it as well as some people do, but of course we're happy to go through these numbers with you. If you want to do the calculation yourself, this is the number that you need to look at. Is that lower than your rent? Now, we've done this for you. If you would like, you can scan this QR code, and this takes you to a page on our website where you can input your current rent. Through a mystical formula that we have created, that will be able to show you roughly how much money you will save if you buy rather than rent. Those of you who would like to, you can scan that now, put in your rent, and it will churn out a number for you, obviously, depending on your rent. Now, again, that isn't perfect. It's a formula we've created by using your rent to guess the value of your property and then applying a 25-year mortgage at 5%. But again, this is an easy calculation that we, as professional real estate consultants, will be able to help you with. Okay? We can do this calculation for you. We can show you how it works. And so we can explain to you in very clear terms whether it actually makes sense for you to buy rather than rent. Because a lot of people, of course, think, yeah, it's probably better to rent than buy. Or, yep, I definitely should buy rather than rent. And you're going on a feeling. You can actually make this calculation, and it's reasonably straightforward. There ends our section on whether I should buy rather than rent. Now, it's very cold-blooded the way we've presented it there. We've done it in numbers, okay? Numbers that you can see. Obviously, there's a huge amount that goes into emotionally whether you buy your own home or not. There's a huge amount that goes into it, you know, in terms of consultation with families and things like this. But at least this way, you'll be able to know if you're going to save money by buying rather than renting. In a very cold-blooded financial way, is property a good investment? Let's say you're thinking about investing in property. There's an awful lot you can invest in. You can put your money in mutual funds, stocks, bonds, art, even cash. Okay? If you're an investor and you've decided you have some money and you want to invest, you need your money to be working hard for you, as hard as possible, so you should be getting the best returns on that money, and also you need to be diversified. So everyone will say, you need a diversified portfolio, and real estate can make up part of that portfolio. Perhaps you're living in it, perhaps you have a rental property, which is here where we're talking, is property a good investment? You're going to buy something to rent it out. So you've decided, well, you're looking into, is property a good investment? How much money is property going to make me, basically? We're going to talk about it in very simplistic terms. How do you calculate your return on your investment property? So on the left side of this picture here, we have gross return. Okay, gross return is rent divided by purchase price times 100. Okay, so we've got an example at the bottom there. Let's say we're buying a property for 1,000,000 dirhams. We're renting it out for 70,000 dirhams. So 70,000 over 1,000,000 times 100, 7%. Okay? You are making 7% on that investment property. Now, let's say that's the very basic way to calculate it. Wouldn't say it's necessarily the amateur's way, but it's the very basic way to calculate it. An investor, which you now all are or will be, will calculate what is called the net return. So the net return is not rent divided by purchase price like we have here. The net return is rent minus service charges. Now, for those of you who don't know what service charges are, they are, let's say you're buying an apartment. They are what the Owners Association charges you for the AC in the corridors, the pool lifeguard, the security, the cleaning of the outside. Service charges can be a big chunk of money. So it's really important that when you get your rent, you know you've got to pay service charges. So we say rent minus service charges over purchase price and cost to buy. Now, what's your cost to buying? So when you buy this investment property, you're going to pay $1 million, but you've also got to pay a very valuable property consultant, okay, who's helping you with all of this. We need to be paid too. You're going to pay us 2%, which is $20,000, and you will need to pay your property registration fee with the Abu Dhabi municipality. That will also be 2%. So, purchase price plus cost to buy. So, your rent $70,000, same as it was here, but your service charges are $5,000. You've got to pay them every year, and this is your yearly rent, so you've got to net those off. And your cost, then the purchase price of the property is $1 million, but you got this cost to buy of $40,000, so your actual cost to buy is $1,040,000. Okay, hopefully if any of you are doing the maths, this works out perfectly. So your net return, 6.25%. Okay? Estate agents will always tell you the 7. This is 7% return. Okay? Now you know better. Don't listen to them. Always calculate the net return here. Now, there's quite a bit of maths in probably more than you expected in both of these examples. Don't worry about it. We will send you the detailed breakdown of the slides and all this kind of stuff, so you'll be able to see for yourselves exactly how to calculate this kind of thing. So you don't need to make notes, but hopefully I'm just kind of giving you the flavor here of how you calculate these things. And so with the consultants who are around the room from Crompton Partners, or on your own in the cold light of the morning, you'll be able to look back over these and remember how to make these calculations. So, a property investment gives you income, right? If you're buying something that's already built. So here we're talking about income. This is the rent that you're getting from your property. A property can also appreciate in value, okay? And that's what most people think of when they think about a property investment. They think, it's going to go up in value. I'm going to make money. I'm going to make cash. And certainly, and we'll talk about this later, that's one of the reasons why off-plan property is pumping at the moment. People think they're going to sell it for more than they bought it for. So there's going to be capital appreciation. So, there's a lot of words on the screen there. I apologize. A lot of words. But this is the single most, I guess, important concept in investing in property. This is something called leverage, which Helen, who I own the company with, absolutely hates me talking about. But leverage is one of the reasons why the what we'll call it, Gen Z will inherit so much capital from our parents. I call myself Gen Z. It's because of their investments in property, all right, and this principle called leverage. So I'm going to try and explain it in a very simple way. If you buy $1 million dirham property cash, right? So let's say you've got $1 million dirhams, and you buy that property. You don't use any finance, you don't use a bank, and it goes up in value 3%. So not all that much, 3%. You'd expect it's kind of an inflation level return there. So then you'll have made 3% on your money, right? You invested $1 million dirhams, it's gone up 3%, you sell it for 1,030 dirhams, you made 3% on the money that you have invested. If, however, you buy a property worth $1 million dirhams with 200,000 dirhams in cash, and you get a mortgage from our good friends at Holo for the other 800,000, and it appreciates 3%, you've made 15% on your money. Seems like a trick. Kind of is. 3% appreciation is 30,000 dirhams. 30,000 divided by 200 times 100 is 15%. You've only put down 200,000 dirhams. You've made 30,000. You've made 15% on your investment. If the property doubles in value, your investment goes up by 500%. So, why does this happen? This happens because the bank doesn't take any part of your appreciation in value. All right? The bank lent you 800,000, they want 800,000 back. If your property goes up in value, the bank still wants 800,000 back. Now, the reverse is also true. If your property goes down in value, maybe goes down to 800,000, the bank doesn't take any of your loss. They still want the 800,000 back. So, this is something which is incredibly important when investing in property. It is the major generator of wealth in property. It's not something that I explain particularly well. It's not a particularly simple concept, I think. But I'll give you an anecdote about my beloved mother. So my mum invested in real estate first of all in 1990. And back in those days, you could get a mortgage for 5%. And so she rented it out and she bought more and more properties. And after a while, she owned 15 properties. Absolutely enormous number. And she was renting them all out. And to this day, she will absolutely swear that the reason why she made money on those properties was because she never had a room empty in them. As soon as a room came available, she'd have another tenant in there, and she would fill it up and she'd be getting that rent money. That's not the reason at all, though she made her money. She made all her money. She invested at a great time. 1990 was a fantastic time to invest, but she made almost all of her money through this principle of leverage. Okay? I'll never tell her that because she's a very, very hard-working lady and very proud of her achievements, and so she should be. But most of her money was made through leverage because she was able to borrow a very small amount from the bank, and she then booked all of that capital appreciation herself. The bank never partook in any of these price increases. Again, it's a difficult concept, however, it's an extremely important one. And that is why I say investors, if you are an investor, investors never buy cash. In a previous life, I was a lawyer for private equity investors. I used to build private equity funds. Private equity funds always put in the absolute minimum of cash and the absolute maximum of financing because of this principle called leverage. What's the best thing to invest in if you want to buy an investment property? Beware studios. Everyone loves studios. They're cheap, they get high net return, but they have many, many pitfalls. So beware of studios. What's the best thing to invest in? Of course, we've just spoken about high net return. Look at your net return, go for a high net return. If you can get a net return of 6.5 to 7%, that's fantastic. Low maintenance property. You're going to need to be looking after this property. You need it to be low maintenance. Family property. Families look after property. They stay there a long time. They are your best tenants. And that's one of the reasons to beware of studios. Studios have poor quality tenants, low job security, high turnover. That's why they give such good returns. Buy in good communities. Great example of that is something like Sun and Sky or Gate Towers on Ream Island. They have low rent volatility. If you invest in something that's in one tower, doesn't have as good facilities, there's going to be much higher volatility in rent. Capital appreciations should feature low down. Now, I've just told you about leverage. Why would I say capital appreciation should feature low down on your priority list? Now, over a long period of time, property always appreciates. Something that we say in our company, how do you never lose money on a property? You control when you sell. It will always come back up, barring war, right? You might have to hold it for a long time, but it will always come back up. Now, people who bet on property going up, they're speculators, okay? They're hoping the property is going to go up in value. Don't do that. Obviously, buy something that you think, okay, if the market comes up, that's going to appreciate, but otherwise, you're speculating. Try and focus on your net return. And beware hidden costs. Great example of that is capacity charge. Always ask your broker, what's the capacity charge? The capacity charge is if an apartment has chilled water, the owner needs to pay a capacity charge, and that can be very high. So there's a couple of, hopefully some tips about what to invest in. The process of a real estate purchase. So our first section we went through, should I rent or should I buy? And we went through the calculation there. Second of all, is property a good investment? Should I invest in property? Okay, your returns in Abu Dhabi, roughly speaking, as I said, a good net return should be 6.5 to 7%. That's on income. Hopefully you get capital appreciation on top of that. And now we're going to go to the process of a real estate purchase. So we've told you maybe it's good to buy the home or your investment. How do you actually do that? So if you could open the folders in front of you, the Crompton Partners folders, we have a guide. I wrote with my own fair hands. So how to conduct a property search. So generally speaking, you will conduct a property search through a broker or a consultant like ourselves. Get on with, hopefully get a recommendation. It's really important. If they're honest and open with you, they will be a huge benefit to you and they will guide you on your journey. Homes versus investments. So you search for these in slightly different ways. Home is going to be a much more emotional purchase. Okay, you're going to look and feel and make sure that it's somewhere that you want to live for the next however many years. Keep an eye on the calculation, of course, the mortgage calculation that we spoke about before. Investment should be done with a calculator, as cold-blooded as you can. Okay, obviously, you want to buy something, a nice property that you hope will appreciate in capital, but investment should be done mostly with a calculator. Property portals. Beware the property portals. They're great for research, but you cannot rely on an individual listing. A lot of fake listings out there. A lot of misinformation. You're much better off finding a broker who you trust. The MOU, most important document in the process. You should read a little bit more later. What the MOU does is once you find a property that you want, you and the seller sign the MOU, you exchange deposit checks, and that reserves the property for you to then go away and sort out all the finance with the bank, and for the seller to sort out his no objection certificates from the developer and perhaps pay off his own loan. So that's very important. Banks, so the seller's bank needs to be paid off before transfer. You'll need your bank to agree to lend you the money and have a valuation. We'll talk about this in more detail later. You need to get NOCs, no objection certificates, at a very minimum from the developer. Then you go to transfer. We'll talk about that later. But transfer happens now at the Department of Municipalities and Transport. In the old days, it used to be SPAs. Now, on pretty much everything, you get a title deed. Mortgages, again, we'll talk about that later, but the mortgages will all need to be paid off before you can go to transfer. Developer NOC, that will be from, let's say, from Aldar, saying that you've paid your service charges, you've paid off your mortgage, and they're happy for you to transfer. And then, seem to have mentioned transfer twice there. So you get a transfer, and then you hopefully become the proud owner of a new property. But all of that is covered in much more detail in the guide. Please take your time. Legal guidance. So as I'm fond of telling as many people who will listen, I have a law degree from Cambridge and I was a lawyer for 7 years, so this is my thing. And again, I'll try not to, because this is really boring. There's no maths in it though. I'll try not to bore you too much, and we'll talk a little bit about what you need to know in terms of legal guidance. So the main law covering this subject is Law 3 of 2015. Not that you need to know the ins and outs of that, but what that basically did is regulate a lot of the activities. It regulated brokers, ourselves. It regulated developers, valuers, mortgage providers. It regulated the real estate market, basically. And we're going to talk a lot about how it regulated developers a little bit later when we talk about off-plan. types of ownership. So, in 2019, a law allowed expatriates to buy freehold in investment zones. So, investment zones are the likes of Reem Island, Saadiyat, Yas, Raha Beach. Before that, expats could only own usufruct, which is the second one there, and usufruct is basically a 99-year lease. There's also a type of ownership called musataha, which is a 49 plus 49 year right to build property on land. Musataha is currently the type of ownership that you get in Al Reef and Al Reef 2. And then you got the ADGM leasehold, so Abu Dhabi Global Markets leasehold. Abu Dhabi Global Markets is based on British law, so that is a 99-year plus 99-year lease. Now, very interestingly, about 6 months ago, it was reported in the news that Reem Island is now part of the ADGM. So I don't know if Reem Island will become 99 years plus 99. We will have to see. But the ADGM has its own entire real estate law, completely separate from what everyone else gets. So when you buy a property, you get a title deed. When you're looking to buy a property, you should look at the title deed. In the bottom left-hand corner, crudely circled in red, is the ownership type. So share and acquisition type, 100% buy and sell. Right hold type is ownership. That basically means freehold. Okay, if it says anything else in that bottom left-hand corner of the title deed, you should have questions. For example, in the Al Reef one, it will say musataha as opposed to ownership. Okay, so we really only care about the law because there are traps. There are things to look out for. There's things that we need to be very careful of when we're buying. In particular, tenanted property. If you're buying a property that has a tenant, and let's face it, if you're an investor, you want to buy a tenanted property, right? You want that property to already have an income stream coming from it. So, you need to know that when you buy a tenanted property, you take that tenancy contract on legally. You don't have to sign it, you take it on legally. We had a great example 7 years ago where an entire building was leased out to a hotel for 3 years. People bought those apartments and they had to stick with a 3-year lease because they took it on legally. So they didn't look at the lease, they didn't realize that, and they were stuck with a 3-year lease to a hotel. So make sure you see it. Rent refund and deposits. Of course, when you're buying a tenanted property, the tenant, let's say, has paid one check in advance, the seller will have rent, that he should be paying to you. Okay, let's say he's taken the rent from 1st of Jan to 31st of December, you buy in June, 6 months that rent should come to you, and that needs to be reflected in the MOU. Also, the tenant will have given a deposit to the owner. Remember, you take on the tenancy contract, so you need to give that deposit back to that tenant when he leaves. So you need that money from the seller. What if you buy a tenanted property and you want to move in yourself? You can't just kick a tenant out. You need to give them 2 months' notice before the end of their tenancy contract. So you need to know when the end of the tenancy contract is, and you need to get the seller to give them notice to vacate, particularly if it's around that 2-month mark. If you miss that, they renew again for another year, and you won't be able to move into that property. That is the first half of our presentation over. I'm sure you're extremely glad to hear that.
So the first question that we have for Thomas is, what is the loan-to-value ratio and how does it affect me?
First of all, thank you for having me and thank you for listening. I'll try and speak slowly. The Scottish accent can be hard to understand. So the loan-to-value, it ties in nicely with Ben when he was mentioning leveraging. So the banks will lend you a certain percentage of the property. And this is the loan to value, the ratio between the loan and the purchase price of the property. So us in the room as expats, we can benefit from 80% loan to value. So the banks will lend 80% of the property when you're buying your first purchase. Now, if you do become a property investor and start investing in 2 or more properties, then the loan to value will be restricted to 60% on any additional purchase. So a good hint, a good tip for those with spouses is to maximise the maximum loan to value. Buy a property in husband's name first of all, and a property in wife's name, and then you've got 80% on two properties, and that is maximising the leveraging of financing the properties. Hopefully that makes sense.
What are the current mortgage rates in the UAE?
Probably the most common question I hear every day. If you look back even a year when rates were lower, we were looking at 2%, 2.5%. Unfortunately, now where we are just now is in a slightly higher interest rate period. Not high, just back to normal rates pre-2019. So we're looking at interest rates for fixed rates of anywhere between 4.69 to 4.99%. It sounds high. It's just back to market averages pre-2019. Now, you can opt for a variable rate mortgage as well, so a rate that may initially be a lower rate of interest, but doesn't offer that security. So you can pick up a variable rate interest, which has a margin of 1.99% plus IBOR, which is the UAE's central rate of interest. Most of our clients at the moment are opting for that security that the fixed rate offers, so we are looking at a lot of 4.69 to 4.99% rates at the moment.
How much can I borrow?
Completely depends on your personal circumstances. This is where myself and my team would really dig deep into your personal circumstances. As a rough rule of thumb, the banks will calculate what's called a debt burden ratio. So they will take your income, if you're a sole applicant, or your joint income, if you're buying as partners, and half of that amount, so let's say you earn jointly 20,000 dirhams a month, you can spend up to 10,000 dirhams monthly on all of your liabilities. So that is the key financial calculation that the bank will do to determine your eligibility for your maximum loan. But as a rough rule of thumb, before you start investigating deeply and you just want to know roughly, take your income, multiply it by 12, multiply it by 7, and that's roughly how much you'll be able to borrow.
Let's say I'm self-employed. Can I get a mortgage?
Absolutely, not a problem at all. In fact, you can benefit by taking a mortgage for a slightly longer period of time as self-employed. Now, it can be quite daunting. There's a lot of additional paperwork. There's a lot of investigations into the business. How long have you been trading? What industry are you in? But absolutely, would not consider being self-employed as a hurdle at all. It makes up around about 40% of our business at Holo. Absolutely can borrow if you're self-employed.
Will I have to transfer my salary?
No, not unless you want a slightly better deal. It's a very common question, and it's not as simple as having your salary credited to your bank account. What banks actually mean when they say salary transfer is having your employer to commit to your salary being transferred to that bank account. If there's changes in your circumstances, if you move jobs, you would need an NOC from your employer before you can actually change your bank account. So some banks will offer a slightly preferential rate, perhaps a lower fee, if they have the commitment of your salary hitting their bank account every month and knowing that salary cannot be moved. What we would normally give as good advice to those that are looking to borrow is to actually keep your salary and your mortgage separate. That gives you financial freedom. Should your circumstances change, you're not trapped. You're not trapped by your mortgage. So it's solid advice to keep your salary and your mortgage separate.
Can I leave the country if I have a mortgage?
Again, absolutely. It's another myth that if you have a property, you're stuck. You have to sell it. Absolutely not. The UAE is a transient country, predominantly expats. The banks understand this. They know that people can be here long term, short term, and they understand that, and they have products and services. All you need to do is be fully transparent with your bank. Most banks will allow you to leave the country with the mortgage, no changes in circumstances. Absolute worst case scenario is they may ask you to change the product type to a non-resident product, and that may incur a slightly higher rate of interest. But you absolutely can leave the country, go home, move to another country, and still benefit from that rental income that your property will now start to generate.
How long will it take for my mortgage to get approved?
Realistically, around about 10 working days. You're borrowing a lot of money from the bank. A lot of things in this country are very, very quick, and we're used to receiving things very, very quickly. But fundamentally, you are borrowing a lot of money from the bank. What they will do is the bulk of the work up front. So they will give you a pre-approval. They've assessed your income. They've assessed you as a borrower. They've approved you to borrow the money. You can then go and search for the property whilst you have a pre-approval in hand. And I'm sure Ben, Helen would agree that it's a great idea to have your pre-approval in hand before you go looking for properties. It means that the seller knows you're an absolute serious buyer, you're ready to go, and the transaction can move quickly. But because the bulk of the work is done in that first section, the pre-approval, it can take around about 10 working days to get that approval in your hand.
Can I buy a property with my spouse, and how will this be calculated?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you do need to be married, so unfortunately that side of banking hasn't quite caught up with the laws in where you can rent with your boyfriend, your girlfriend. If you're buying a property together and you are taking a mortgage, then you do need to be married. Now, if you're buying in cash, that's not the case. You can buy with your partner. But if you're borrowing the funds, you do need to be married. And it's simply as adding both of the incomes together. But it is a good idea if you are looking to invest in lots of property and maximise your leveraging, that you do keep it separate. It does mean that you can borrow the most amount of money from the banks.
What type of properties can I purchase using a mortgage?
Anything. As long as you can get a title deed, the banks will finance the purchase. Ben went over the different types of properties and the different ownership statuses. There is a bank to lend for any scenario. Now, depending on where you are buying, it may restrict the banks that will lend in that area. Al Reef, for example, as Ben mentioned earlier, that's a slightly different type of ownership, so some banks won't lend in that area. But absolutely, as long as there's a title deed, as long as the unit is of good standing, then you'll be able to finance that unit.
No off-plan property.
Good point. Off-plan. Once it's ready. So once if you're buying off-plan, as long as the unit's ready for handover, you'll be able to finance, and I'm sure Ben will come on to this shortly, the final payment to the developer. As long as that doesn't exceed 80%, you'll absolutely be able to finance that payment as well.
Why should I go through an independent mortgage broker instead of my bank?
Transparency, access to the market, unbiased advice. What we do as a broker is give you guys access to over 500 products in the market. As you can imagine, that can be incredibly time consuming to find out what is the right deal, what is the best deal. We have that all under one roof, and we can direct you straight away to which product is right for you without you having to spend lots and lots of time doing your own research. We're transparent. We work for you guys. If you're speaking to a bank, they can only sell you their product, and of course their opinion is going to be that their product's the best. They'll give you all the pros and none of the cons, where it's our job to make sure you're protected, protect your financial security, protect you going forward. So you know that when you speak to an independent broker like ourselves, that we have your interest at heart, and we want to make sure ultimately it's an enjoyable experience. Buying a property should be exciting, not stressful, and we take all the legwork away from the buyer.
Thank you.
Right, so if you remember my very first slide, off-plan property sales in Abu Dhabi are up something like 135% in the market. So in the last year. So we thought it we thought it only fair to give off-plan property its fair dues and have a segment on it. It'll be presented by Sharon and I. So we're going to talk about these off-plan projects, and we need to make sure, I'm sure we've got healthy skeptics in the room, that we talk openly and fairly about off-plan projects. Often real estate consultants can be accused of everything's amazing, this is amazing, that's amazing, this new project's amazing, just buy. You know, we like to think we're a little bit more discerning than that, so we can offer you both sides of the equation when dealing with off-plan property. Okay, first of all, we're going to talk about what is off-plan. Just ignore that for the moment. So what is off-plan? So off-plan actually comes from the fact that it is not built yet. You cannot see this property. You buy it literally from a plan, right? Someone shows you a floor plan and you buy it off the plan. Okay, that can be distinguished from something which is direct from developer. So sometimes a developer will build a whole tower and then sell it built, so you can go in and see it. We call that direct from developer. It's not quite the same as off-plan. They share some similarities. And then there's also a secondary market for off-plan. What we're talking about, you know, when a lot of people talk about when I buy off-plan, I'm going to flip it. Okay, so someone has bought from the developer and they're now selling that unit still not built to another buyer. So really three things you need to bear in mind there about off-plan. But basically when we're talking about off-plan now, we're talking about buying something that is not built and you just look at the floor plan. So why is off-plan so hot right now? Sharon?
You probably ask yourself, why is off-plan so hot right now? Well, there is a big marketing behind it. When you probably open your social media, you will see a lot of advertisement about these off-plan projects. There is a fear of missing out, and agents, they get paid commission by the developers, so they maybe are more prone to advertise the off-plan rather than secondary market. It's easier to purchase from off-plan. You don't have to deal with tenants arranging viewing. Basically, you just see like a floor plan and you can pick your unit. There is no involvement from the bank because you're not going to get like assistance for a mortgage. And right now in Abu Dhabi, there is a low capital appreciation in the built market as opposed for when you're buying a property that is not ready, because you're expecting a higher capital appreciation when the property is actually ready.
If you remember the very first slide, we saw that in the last year, the secondary market apartments had appreciated about 1% in value. So investors at the moment are saying, okay, off plan, maybe that's where I can make a little bit more money than buying in the already built market.
The pros of buying off plan, clearly you are paying something below market price. You're getting capital appreciation. You're buying something that is going to be new. You can choose your units. So if you have some preferences on the view, the high floor, you can pick your units. You have a DLP period, which is defect liability period. The developer is gonna cover for 1 year for any defect in the property. You are not gonna pay the commissions for the agents because it's the developer who pays for it. You have a variety, a selection of payment plan that you can choose. And sometimes you even have additional offers, such as the Arna points from Aldar, for example. So you could get like several benefits.
And the cons of off-plan, you see we're trying to do a bit of a good cop, bad cop thing here. So the cons of off-plan, handover could be delayed. The developer might even go into default, and we'll talk about that a little bit later and the things that the Abu Dhabi government has done to stop that happening. will you get what you hope for? Obviously, you're buying it from a plan, you're buying it from some pictures, maybe there's a model, you're expecting something. Will you get what you expect? The time cost of money. So buying off plan, you're going to need to be putting money down and you're not going to be getting any income back from that. So money has a time cost. So when we're thinking about what to invest money in, you can put your money in a high interest bank account and get 5% on that, okay? If you put it into an off-plan property, you're not going to get any return on that. So in theory, it's costing you 5% to invest that money into an off-plan property. And unlike a secondary market property, you're not going to be getting any income from that property for the duration of the build, only when you rent it out later.
Is off-plan safe? Like we mentioned before, there is this law number 3 of 2015, and the developers were the first target of this law. Your money are going into an escrow account. When you're purchasing an off-plan property, you're going to write post-dated checks to the developer, and those they're going to be to the escrow account of the developer. So the developer can only access it on construction milestone and only after 20% of the construction.
Yeah, so the new law meant that developers need to have already built 20% of that project before they can access your funds. So if anything happens, you've hopefully got that buffer in the project. Now, how to judge a good investment. So, we'll wait for that. So, when you're buying off-plan, how do you know what you're buying is a good purchase? So the best way to do it is, because developers, they want you to buy their project as opposed to something built, they should be offering you a discount to market rate. All right? Why should you buy my project that you're not going to get it for 3 years as opposed to buying a built project? So the thing that you need to do is whenever you're assessing an off-plan project, compare it to something which is built. So a great example at the moment, Aldar is selling their Gardenia by the Bay. Maybe some of you have heard of it. It is right next to Water's Edge, literally in the same spot. It's the same number of units, very kind of similar layouts. So if you're considering an investment in Gardenia by the Bay, compare it to Water's Edge. Okay, Aldar will say it's a better product and there's more amenities and things like that. But if you're a cold, dead-eyed investor, you want to make sure that you have that comparison, because Aldar should be giving you a discount to market price. Okay, so make sure anything you have, you compare to something which is already built. Don't go along with the marketing spiel and the advertising and the brokers trying to push you into it. Do your assessment. The other is learn to read a floor plan. So this is off plan. You are buying this from a floor plan. Okay, most people don't know the first thing about reading a floor plan. So here's a very, very quick guide. Corridors and foyers are bad. All right. So this is a floor plan of a unit in Marina Square. Look at that corridor. It's absolutely enormous. You got to pay for that. You have to pay for that corridor, and it is not living space. All right. You got a massive entrance there. It's not living space. This is another corridor, right? That is not living space either. And here you've also got a bit of dead space. That's not even to begin to talk about the shape of this unit. Okay? The most spatially efficient units are square. Love square units if you're buying off plan. They are the most efficient. Now, we'll compare this with the rarest of all floor plans, a 2-bed with a bedroom either side of the living room. Look how lovely and square this is. And you can see the dead spaces here, tiny bit there, and a little bit in the entrance there. Otherwise, this is a fantastic use of space, and you'll be able to use pretty much everything that you're paying for. Another point to pick out, bedroom sizes. People don't understand bedroom sizes. So here, I apologize, super boring, but very, very important if you're buying off plan. 16 square meters is the Goldilocks zone. All right, 16 square meter bedroom. And why do I say that? You got a double bed 2 meters by 2 meters. You want a meter clearance all the way around it, and you want a wardrobe on the wall. All right. This is 4 meters by 4 meters. This is a 16 square meter bedroom. This is a floor plan of a project that is handing over soon. This is very, very popular. And you look at this bedroom here. It's 3 meters by 3 meters, right? It's only a 2-bed. You can see the master bedroom. Yeah, it's 4 by 4. That's pretty good. This is 3 by 3. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, 3 by 3, it's almost 4 by 4. Obviously, 3 by 3 is 9 square meters, all right? 4 by 4 is 16, so 7 square meters smaller, almost half the size. This is not a double bedroom, all right? This is a single bedroom. So make sure when, at a very minimum, when you're looking at the floor plans, small corridors, small foyers, is it square? Check out the bedroom sizes. You might have to live in this one day, so make sure you know that. Okay.
What does a good payment plan look like? So a good payment plan looks like when you pay the least money over construction. So we used to have payment plan like 20% over construction and 80% on the endover. Unfortunately, there is no more payment plan like that. However, we still have the possibility to have some payment plans such as 30% over construction and 70% on endover, or 40 and 60. Another good payment plan could be like a post-endover payment plan. However, when we consider 30-70 or 40-60, we need to think also how long is the build time. We have an instance of a developer in Dream Island where the project is going to be handed over in a year. So if you're paying 30% or 40% over 1 year, it's still a big amount of money. While if we're paying this amount over 3-4 years, it's like 10% a year. So we need to consider that as well.
Traps to avoid. Lawyers love traps. So here are the traps to avoid, or the main ones, when you are thinking about an off-plan property. The hype. So you'll see, on social media, on reports, this phase has been sold out, this huge queue, this fight. Okay, avoid the hype. Avoid the fact that police were called because there were so many people there. Compare the project to a built project. Does it have value? Second, value versus deal. All right, the developers will offer you fake deals, 10% off, 20% off, no ADM fee. Don't fall into the trap of this is a great deal, I'm getting so much discount. Look at the value of what you're buying. Okay, there's some developers out there might even offer 40% off. Okay, 40% off might still be too expensive, so don't get sucked in by the deal. Unfortunately, even I've thrown myself on this. People buy with emotion. All right, people don't buy with calculators. People buy with emotion. So sometimes you see like, oh, this is a fantastic deal. You forget to look at the value. So that's important. Floor plans we spoke about. Payment plans, Sharon just mentioned. What kind of payment plan will suit you? All right, look at that. And as she mentioned there, how long is this going to be built in? Is it going to be built in 4 years, 1 year? The payment plan, really needs to make sense for you. Don't buy something to flip it. You can, but again, this is, and we'll talk about it at the bottom, if you're buying it because you think the market is going to appreciate, you become a speculator. Okay, buy it with the intention to hold it to handover. You can flip off-plan property, not always though. So if you're buying it to flip it and you can't, you need to make sure you make those payments. Buying in phase 2 more expensively than phase 1. So this kind of applies also to flipping. Often phase 1 will be sold at a slight discount. Phase 2 will be a bit more expensive, and phase 3, assuming it's popular. So if you're buying in phase 2 or phase 3 and thinking that you can flip it, you can't. The people in phase 1 might be able to sell, but you'll be at the back of the queue. And again, I've already spoken about it. Don't be a speculator. Don't buy off-plan because you think you're going to make a quick buck. A lot of people have been burned by that. You do not know what is going to happen to the market.
The best practice. So first of all, you need to understand what you're looking for from an investment. It could be capital appreciation, it could be ROI, it could be the unit you want to go and live in. So first of all, you need to understand that. Then visit all the developers and compare their offerings. Or just find a good broker, a reliable consultant who can do that for you. And that's the best practice.
And obviously, we're offering ourselves as this best consultant. Clearly, now there's you don't need consultants to find off-plan property. It's all with the developers. In the secondary market, you need a consultant, you need a broker because they have it and you can't find it. So you don't necessarily need a consultant when you're buying off-plan. You can go to the developers, but you'll need to do a lot of comparisons and go to a lot of developers because the developer. And this is very similar to what Thomas was talking about earlier. If you go to your bank will sell you what they have, right? If you go to Thomas, he'll find the best option for you. So find a consultant who finds the option which fits your requirements. Congratulations, you've sat through this entire presentation. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. So much for coming and for sitting through it. So now we can have a quick Q&A on, I'm happy to answer questions that you have on any of those slides. Does anyone have a question? If you don't have a question, I'm going to talk through the MOU again, so think of something quickly. And I'm not even joking.
Hi, so kind of a naive question. If you're selling a unit while it's under mortgage, how does that actually kind of work? Can you actually do this, or do you have to pay the full mortgage before selling this? How does that work?
Yeah, so if you're buying a property that has a mortgage on it, if you're using finance, your bank will pay that mortgage off. Okay, they'll get a liability letter sent to the bank. The bank will pay that mortgage off, and then you take that property to transfer. So when you take it, it doesn't have a mortgage on it. It's usually how it works.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so what protection do you have for off-plan in areas that they may deliver the building, for example, I'm thinking Ring Island off just top of my head, and the building might be ready, but then all of the other critical infrastructure like your waste management, your plumbing, all of the sewage works, all of that stuff that hasn't yet been established and connected, because that has obviously had issues in Abu Dhabi in the past, especially in the new islands where they've developed. So what do you have in protection for that? Your building yourself, your flat might be ready, but everything else around it isn't. Do you have protection on that?
Yeah, so the developer won't be able to hand over the unit to you until they have the building completion certificate and sign off from civil defense. So they won't get that until, I think it's everything apart from gas. So they might hand it to you without the gas connection, but everything else needs to be connected before they can hand it to you and you get your title deed, upon that point. So they won't be able to hand you a shell with no amenities, no electricity, no water, that kind of thing, no waste management.
You mentioned at one point capacity.
Yes,
We have no control over that.
correct.
How many providers are there, and how do we find out about who the providers are and their charges?
So you bring up a great point. So service charges used to be managed by the developer, and capacity charge as well. So to recap, capacity charge is what a chilled water provider charges the owner of a unit to provide the chilled water connection. It's not consumption. Consumption is done by the tenant or by you. So owners have to pay for this connection to even be provided, and obviously they don't have an option, right? There is one chilled water provider for a building. Now the municipality have come in and come down hard on service charges, right? They've really push hard on developers to lower service charges. A great example is Al Munira used to be 15 dirhams a square foot, now it's like 11. Okay, but nothing has happened with cooling charges yet. So unfortunately, it's a bit of a license to print money for developers, chilled water. charging and capacity. Hopefully we'll get some regulation in that soon so that they won't be able to charge whatever they like, but currently, yeah, you don't have an option. You have to accept that chilled water, and they can, I guess, within reason, charge whatever they like.
Can we find out beforehand?
Yeah, you need to find out from the seller. It's not on Dari that I've seen. If you go on the Dari app, you can download that app. It's got all the service charges on it. The capacity charges you need to find out from the seller. Ask for a bill.
Question around for the post-payment plans. So how frequent are they? And what's the incentive for the developer to offer this plan?
They're not that frequent. There's not much incentive for the developer because it means they're offering you basically an interest-free loan. Now, however, there's not much interest from a buyer either, because if you think about it, let's say you paid your payment plan 40% till handover, and 40% till handover, and then 60% you have in staged payments, let's say over 2 or 3 years. It's still a lot of cash you need to provide. As a buyer, you're much better off getting a mortgage, paying it off, and then because with post-handover plan, you don't get ownership either. Right, the developer will retain the ownership until you've paid that whole amount. So unless you're someone who struggles to get a mortgage, or you're cash rich and just want to pay it off and you don't believe in finance, see, investors never buy cash, there's not much incentive for buyers to use a post-handover payment plan. For the developers, it's a marketing ploy, right? Sounds good. You don't have to get a mortgage. We'll give you an interest-free loan at the end. You don't need to worry about it. So it's more of a marketing thing, I think. But for some people, it's attractive. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
First of all, thank you for the wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I just wanted to know what are the legal and regulatory requirements for a property ownership?
Legal requirements for property ownership by an individual. I mean, only that you are a legal person. Companies can also own properties, and that you pay for it or you have a mortgage on it. In terms of regulatory requirements, again, as long as you are a legal person, and again that covers companies, you can own a property. That's not a problem. Sorry, the microphone's just here. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I was just wondering, is it possible for expats, for instance, to beat the developer, buy their own land and build their own property?
It is. So there are a few places in Abu Dhabi where you can buy land and either build a villa or even a block of apartments. You'll need to, building your own villa is quite straightforward. You don't need any regulatory approval there, but if you build a block of apartments, you would need to go through the hoops to become a developer, particularly if you want to sell it off plan.
Is it by any chance cheaper to do that yourself?
Much. Yeah, if you, we did this, good example is Yas Acres. So they sold 3 phases of Yas Acres as villas, and then the 2 at the top called Leia, they sold as plots. If you were to buy the land and build your own, you would have probably saved about 40% on what you would pay Alba. Cost to build, roughly speaking, is about 3,000 dirhams per square meter. Kind of like put that in your hat and think about it. But yeah, it's much cheaper. But obviously, getting a builder, managing them through the process, that is something else. And also, when you do that, of course, you're going to be living in a building site all around you. People will be building their own villas around you. So there are some pretty serious cons to buying your own land and building. But it is much cheaper.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I wonder when the offline is ready, there's electricity and power connection is quite a lot, like 20,000 dirhams. Is that legal or regular thing?
So you're saying that the developer charges you 20,000 dirhams to connect the power and water?
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that. I mean, you'd need to check your SPA that you sign. So if they're allowed to charge you that in the SPA, then there's nothing regulatory that I think would preclude them from doing that. But if it's not in the SPA, you can definitely push back.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure. You had a question? Okay, go ahead.
Thanks for the information you gave, but just I'm curious. I've always seen residential properties, and very rarely I see, or maybe never I've seen commercial. Can you give some information about commercial properties? Is it available for expats to buy? Or
Yes, but it's rare.
yeah, it's rare. And is there any difference in comparison to residentials?
So, and if we talk about, let's say, some more developed markets, commercial real estate is normally owned in bulk by one company, because the best tenants are the ones that take a lot of floors. Now, what's happened in Abu Dhabi, and I think there's maybe only three buildings I can think of: Sky Tower, Tamur Tower, and Adax, where people have sold commercial units, and sometimes they've sold just them by single units. So you can have a floor of maybe 16 units, and all 16 are owned by individual people. Okay, sometimes they bought full floors. It's not a very good way to invest in real estate, because if you buy a unit and your client gets too big for that unit, they leave. So what normally happens, like in the UK, a good example, an investor would come in and he'd buy, the whole building of commercial real estate, because then he can bring in companies that can expand and they can take more space, because companies are always growing and contracting. So you can invest in commercial real estate, and again, you can calculate your return exactly as you would if you were investing, if you were buying residential. But again, commercial comes with its own problems. It's going to be harder to find a tenant. You've got a fit-out period, probably of 3 months, where the company's going to come in. They want to put in floors, ceilings, partitions, walls, and again, if they move out, that's all got to be taken down. So it's a lot more hassle to manage, and you can certainly buy it, but from a professional investment standpoint, it's much better done by companies who specialize in that, who take big chunks of real estate. But it certainly is possible, and is often done by companies who want to own their own office space. They run into a problem though. If they get big, where do they go? They own this floor, and they're going to take this floor and then some other unit somewhere else. Sure.
I'm sorry I keep referring to the UK, because that's obviously the market.
Oh, we're in the British club. Oh no, we're not. It's just called the club. Sorry.
So in the UK, we have the NH, I think it's called the RC, which is like a guarantee when you buy a property. Now here, I think it's only for 12 months compared to 10 years in the UK. Is that correct? Has that changed? Or does it differ from developer to developer?
No. So when you get a brand new unit handed over, you have something called the defects liability period, which lasts for a year. However, the construction is guaranteed by the contractor for 10 years. So in a similar way. So the structure is guaranteed for 10 years, and the unit is guaranteed if you take handover directly from the developer for 1 year.
Can you explain the difference when you say the constructor compared? So say for an example, the recent rain we just had, if you suddenly found, because it might be longer than a year, but you had a massive flood, it's after a year, who is the liability?
So if it's with the structure of the unit, so let's say, so pretty much from the inside of the walls outwards, then it'll be the 10 years. From let's say the inside of the wall, so fixtures, fittings, plumbing, that kind of thing, the thing that you would normally discover after a year, that's in the DLP. But structural deficiencies, cracks in the wall, things that weren't built properly, things that are like legitimately missing from the walls and maybe the MEP and things like that, that's covered for 10 years by the contractor, usually through the developer.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Yes?
Can you only buy from developers? Can you buy from a local villa, for example, Khalifa Alif, or
So as expatriates, we can only buy in places called investment zones. So those are mostly reclaimed land. So investment zones they go from the Marina Mall Complex, Tareem Island, Saadiyat, Jubail, Fahid, Yas, Raha Beach, not Raha Gardens. That's only for locals. Al Reef, Reef 2, Hydra, Gadir, Reman, Masdar City, Murray Island. There's quite a few investment zones, but yeah, you couldn't buy something in Khalifa A or mainland Abu Dhabi or Shadput City, MBZ, none of those areas. They're local only. Okay, I think that looks like it's it. Well, thank you so much. Again, we really appreciate you coming and lasting through this. Hopefully, when you came in the door, you were introduced to one of our consultants. If you have any further questions, please collar them and feel free to speak to them. Again, I want to mention our friends at Holo over here. If you have specific questions about mortgages, they'd be more than happy to entertain you. Please do stay around. Have another drink. Maybe there's still some canopies coming around. We'd love to meet you all and get to know you better. Oh yes, go ahead. Well,
recommendations on areas particular or particularly to avoid or
I mean, yes, but I couldn't tell you like this.
or I'd have to kill you.
Yeah. So what I would say is my two favorite most recent off-plan projects that I think are great value are Sustainable City and Ream Hills. I think those are fantastic value to be on the positive side. Obviously, a lot of work is being put into Saadiyat Islands, Jubail and Yas at the moment. So those areas are getting a lot of not just development where you see buildings coming up and things like that, but genuine infrastructure, museums, schools, parks, the amusement at parks and things like that. So when you look at somewhere to invest, try and look where the infrastructure is going in, all right? Because those places, the infrastructure will appreciate those places more than where that's not being cared about, okay? Where people are just building towers and more towers and more towers. So that would be my general recommendation. Pleasure. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.